Hey, I'm Scott at ediblemusic.com. We love air here. We thrive on it. And so does your mix. And I want to show you some ways to help to bring up the air in your mix balance. Some of what I'll show you at points will cross between both mixing and mastering, because I'll show you a bit of processing that you can add to your mix bus, which influences everything that's happening in the mix, just as when you're mastering, you're influencing everything that's occurring within the stereo track. Now, there are a few ways, or a couple of ways, to think about air in your mix. Often it refers to the really high frequencies, say above 15K, 16K, 18 up to 28, up to 40, up to frequencies that we can't even hear, but which will have some effect on frequencies that we can hear because they're pulling all of those things up. It's usually a very gentle slope. Now, if you were to do that, you could add it to your master. And if I were to boost up here, it's certainly making some of the higher frequency elements feel taller and maybe closer or brighter. But as you can tell, we're not really capturing a sense of openness that airy quality usually refers to. And you don't usually need to add a high shelf or a bell filter, a really nice gentle bell filter, to the entirety of the mix. Often, all you need to do is first to add it to just a few elements. And I would recommend, we don't have any on this song right now, but vocals, maybe your snare drum, and maybe one other instrument. So let's start with that. We'll add some high boost, and this is something that sort of follows those electric guitars. We'll boost that up first. And also the snare. See, now that's not really working, is it? And the problem that's coming up here already is that airiness usually relies upon a live performance being recorded through a microphone, which actually captures the literal air moving around in the room. But here we're working with synthesized instruments. In your problem, you may also be working with a capture that was nevertheless recorded in a really dampened room, where you're not even capturing any of the reflections that would be coming off of the space that you're recording in. Then it's very difficult to bring out the air where the air doesn't actually exist. So we can brighten things up almost as much as we want, but then at a certain point they're going to start sounding not really great, and they're going to start kind of grating at your ears and poking out of the mix too much. So we'll leave this snare drum as it is, and we'll add one more EQ, I think, to there was this one right here. This is sort of like a chorus within the narrative of the song. This little synth comes up as a lead over the chorus. So we'll brighten that up a bit. So those two now that I've boosted are taller, but we don't have any air yet. So what you can do, especially if you're working with either a really dead sounding or dry sounding recording, or if you're working with synthesized sounds, is you can make air using reverb. Let's do that. We'll make a return track, and I'll put a reverb on it. Let's up the quality, and you can use any reverb. What you're looking for when you're applying a reverb here is to kind of try to emulate or simulate the characteristics of a room. So you want to emphasize the reflections that would be coming off of the walls and the surfaces within the actual room that would be recorded. So I'm going to turn down the diffuse a little bit, because that's more of the slower sort of cloudy reverb noise that would come up, and the reflections is what we want to aim for. Now this is where we can add in our snare reverb. And we'll add both those two elements that we had before. That sounds a little roomier. And I'd also like to add a little bit more air and kind of roominess to the drums. So I'm gonna add another reverb here. Let's just choose a preset for now. Short Bliss, or let's go with Lively Resonant. If you're gonna choose a preset on your reverb plugin, again, you can use whatever reverb plugin you want. If you're gonna choose a preset, then it will likely be called something like bright or reflective, or it might even have a specific setting to the drums, because often drum reverbs, you want them to be kind of reflective, because then you get some opening up around them. And now let's send the entire drum kit to this track. And we'll EQ the reverb a bit. Let's hear them together. All right, so we've focused our reverbs on just a couple of program elements, and all you usually need is just a couple of them, and that will give a sense of airiness kind of floating up above and around the mix. And I like to have reverbs on drums, so I think it's useful also to add them to drums, especially program drums like this. You can hear the drum sound solid without the reverb on it. But once it comes in, you feel a lot more dimension in the mix. So now we've made some air by introducing some reverb effects. Now you can hear how the EQ boosts that we added to just those couple of tracks are interacting really closely with the reverbs that we're sending them to. And this is something that I emphasize in the 5-Day Foundation series that I teach you, where I walk you through the steps of the mixing process, but I also emphasize how each of these steps are not really isolated, they're correlated. If you want to use EQ, then you also want to think about how that interacts with your use of reverb, with your use of compression and saturation. So I want you to go through that series and expand your thoughts about how these tools interact with each other. You can get it at ediblemusic.com/5days. And now we can come back to the mix bus and see how it sounds to add a boost up here. Now that we've made some air, that boost will include some of the air that we've made using these reverbs. And if I come back to turn those reverbs off, this is where we hear the sharpness of the shakers and the snare coming out again. It doesn't really feel all that pleasant on your ears, and they're actually masking the rest of the tones of the balance that you've got. So if you add some reverb, then it'll pull those up and it'll kind of gel everything together up there. right? So a really important aspect of using reverb is to both create and enhance the sense of dimension, space, airiness of your mix. If you're just getting started with reverb or you want to really propel your use of it, then try out the next video that I'm going to show you here. It's all about early reflections and how they can give you that really nice sense of dimension and movement within your mix. Try it out.